Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. So today we're going to look specifically at citizenship and naturalization. Now, what does that mean and what are we going to cover today? So we're going to look at a few different topics in today's video. We're going to look at the definitions of citizenship and naturalization, or citizenship and nationality. We're going to look at nationality acquisition in 3 different ways. So by birthright, by bloodline, and by naturalization. We're also going to look at some cross-country comparisons of policies. So looking at them categorized by means of acquiring citizenship and kind of the difficulty of naturalization. We'll also look at some reasons for the loss of citizenship around the world and look at some policies for dual citizenship. So being able to carry or have 2 nationalities at the same time. So how is citizenship defined? So here, this definition that I'm going to use here is adopted from the EUI's Global Citizenship Observatory, which is a major source that we're going to be using also in this video. And of course, if you're interested in all of the sources and references that we use for information in this video, you can always find them down in the description below, just like in any of my other videos. So again, the definition of citizenship is a legal status and relation between an individual and a state that entails specific legal rights and duties. So some examples of these rights could include, for example, voting or being able to hold political office or run for political candidacy. Also, depending on the country, there can also be responsibilities. So for instance, some countries require service in armed forces or require everyone to vote. These are just some examples of responsibilities that someone might have also if they hold citizenship of a country. So the term citizenship is generally synonymous with the term nationality. So the IOM glossary refers to nationality instead of citizenship because it's a term used more often in international law. But the Global Cit glossary from the Robert Schuman Center at the European University Institute recognizes that the terms can be synonymous, but that the thematic page that they use refers to citizenship instead of nationality in order to emphasize that the legal relationship between a person and a state, as recognized in international law, also pertains to specific legal rights and duties. All right, so in most cases, we're seeing that the terms citizenship and nationality are used synonymously. So now let's look at 2 ways that someone can receive citizenship, either through, for instance, descent or birth. So descent means that there's some kind of heritage or lineage or parents or grandparents that have had citizenship, whereas birth has to do with the actual place of birth. So we have 2 terms that are often used here. The first is Ius Sanguinis, and this means that the person's citizenship is determined based on the citizenship of his or her parents at the time of the person's birth, or maybe even at a later time. All right, so this really depends on the citizenship of the parents. Then you also have the term Ius Soli. And this has to do with the determination of a person's citizenship on the basis of his or her country of birth. So, for instance, a country like the United States has also Ius Soli citizenship, meaning if you were born there on U.S. soil or in a U.S. territory, you automatically have U.S. citizenship. So these concepts both describe when people have the right to citizenship. And that is citizenship that doesn't need to be applied for. It is directly an entitlement. So what is naturalization? The EUI Global Citizenship Observatory uses a broad definition of naturalization, meaning all modes of acquisition after birth other than those for which birth in the territory or citizenship of the parents is a condition. So in other words, this really just means that naturalization describes a procedure of obtaining citizenship which requires generally a formal application and the granting of citizenship by a public authority. All right, so it's not just an entitlement that you get immediately, it's something that you actually have to apply for, and that is naturalization. So naturalization is then again distinctly different from birthright citizenship via Ius Sanguinis or Ius Soli, right? So it's different than your birthright to citizenship. So now let's look at a little bit of the spectrum with regard to the difficulty of naturalization. So that is not birthright citizenship, that is really acquiring the citizenship, having to apply for the citizenship. And here we can look at this on a spectrum from less difficult to more difficult, and I'll just give a few examples of countries that are known for being less difficult to acquire citizenship to some countries that are known for being more difficult to apply for citizenship. So on the less difficult side of things, we have countries like Canada and Ireland. So for example, in Canada, you have a comparatively short, non-consecutive period of years that someone must live there. So in the Canadian case, someone must have lived 3 out of the last 5 years in Canada, and they must hold a permanent residency only at the time of their application, not for the entire 3 years in the country. In Ireland, for example, there is a necessity to have 5 years of residency, although only 1 year of this needs to be consecutive. So, for one entire period without leaving the country. Applications can also be approved without meeting all of the requirements for those people who have Irish heritage or strong connections to an alive or dead Irish citizen. So this is really on the less difficult side of the spectrum. Then still on the less difficult side of the spectrum, but maybe just a little bit more, we have a country like Sweden that has a 5-year residency requirement. So this is a little bit more difficult than Ireland, for example, since the applicant must have secured a permanent residency before applying for naturalization and needs that 5-year residency period. However, there is an easier route for Nordic immigrants. So Nordic immigrants have a different route that's a little bit easier than everyone else for acquiring citizenship in Sweden. Then we can move to a country that has a bit harder stance for naturalization. So that is Switzerland. So in general, you need a 10-year residency requirement that is required, and often 2 to 5 years of those must be spent in the canton where the immigrant intends to naturalize. And a canton here you can think of as like a county. So cantons also individually process applications and issue decisions, although there are some national guidelines related to, for instance, what is successful integration, with things like, not claiming social benefits and 3 years before applying and other things that we'll look into later. But you can already see that the situation in Switzerland is a lot more difficult than the situation in Canada. Now let's look at a couple of countries that have very difficult requirements for naturalizing in the country. So let's take Qatar, for example. Qatar has 25 years of consecutive residency requirement. You have to also earn a lawful income and speak Arabic. And additionally, in the country, with regard to birthright citizenship only goes through the paternal lineage, so only through the lineage of the father. So only the father can pass down Qatari citizenship, not the mother. We can also look at another country like China, where we know that it's very difficult to naturalize. So naturalization by anyone without direct Chinese family lineage is really extremely rare. So foreigners without a Chinese bloodline more commonly just earn permanent residency instead and never gain nationality. Now let's look at the acquisition of citizenship or naturalization in a few countries around the world. And I'm going to start off with Canada here. Here you can see citizenship by birthright, by bloodline, and by naturalization. So as similar to the United States, Canada has both Ius Soli and Ius Sanguinis birthright citizenship. So if you're born there, you get citizenship automatically. If your parents are citizens, you also get citizenship immediately. So there is a restriction on the Ius Sanguinis since 2008. There is a first generation limitation. So that means, for instance, that essentially people who were born outside of Canada who inherited their Canadian citizenship from their parents cannot pass it down to their children if they were born abroad. But in general, it's quite easy with regard to having access both by being born in the country or being born to Canadian parents. Now, for someone to naturalize in the country, we can look at eligibility to apply for naturalization. So you need to have permanent residency plus be physically present in Canada for 3 out of the past 5 years. This includes time spent on other regular statuses such as temporary visas. You only have to have a permanent residency at the time of application. You need to pay taxes, have a sufficient level of English or French, so either language is fine, and pass a history and civics test. Now we can also look at Sweden. So we can look at citizenship by bloodline, by naturalization, and naturalization is easier or harder depending on your country of origin. And really here, there's just a split between people coming from Nordic countries and people coming not from Nordic countries. So here you have the rule of Ius Sanguinis, not Ius Soli. So citizenship is passed down based on the nationality of the parents, for example. So as of mid-2015, any child born to at least one Swedish parent is Swedish regardless of where their birth occurred. So if we look at naturalization for adults who are citizens of Nordic countries, in general, this is easier. So it seems that Nordic country citizens can apply for citizenship just like anyone else after 2 years with a clean criminal record. But if they wait for 5 years, then they can claim citizenship rather than apply for it. So for everyone else, they can apply for citizenship after 5 years in the country. They have to reach the age of 18, be able to verify their identity, have met the requirements for habitual residence. So that's generally 5 years continuously, and have lived an orderly life in Sweden. So they need to have a permanent residence permit. A temporary residence permit doesn't apply, or have the right of residence or a residence card. And this is for people, for instance, who are EU citizens. So the main rule is that the time with the residency permit that leads to the permanent residency permit is included in the period of habitual residence. So for instance, if someone had a temporary residence permit as a student first, for example, this would all be counted in the years of residency. Now let's look at the United States, and here we can see citizenship by birthright, by bloodline, and by naturalization. So again, the US has a number of ways to acquire citizenship automatically, so without having to submit a naturalization application at birth. And so that is both Ius Solis and Ius Sanguinis. So Ius Solis is actually defined in the Constitution. It is the 14th Amendment. So all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So basically, if you're born in the United States, you automatically get citizenship. The Ius Sanguinis is actually not part of the Constitution, but has become part of the US Citizenship Code. So in general, a child born to at least one US citizen parent outside of the US can claim citizenship without having to go through the naturalization process. So here you have two ways to directly get citizenship at birth. So naturalization in the US is defined as the acquisition of US citizenship subsequent to birth, okay? So US naturalization eligibility can be a complicated process depending on a number of different things. In general, the person needs to be at least 18 years old and have a permanent residency for 5 years. 3 years of residency are allowed if married to or living with a U.S. citizen for the past 3 years and they've not left the country for more than 18 months during that period. So being married to or living with a U.S. resident makes this a bit easier and cuts down the period. A person also needs to have a basic knowledge of English, both in reading and writing, and have a basic knowledge of U.S. history and civics. And if the person is a male and within the draft age window between 18 and 26, they need to have also signed up for the selective service, or colloquially known as the draft. Now we can look at Switzerland. And Switzerland, we can look at citizenship by bloodline, which they have a comparatively difficult naturalization process related to many nearby countries. For instance, compared to Sweden or France or the Czech Republic or even Germany and Italy. So citizenship is passed down by birth from at least one parent. So if at least one parent is a Swiss citizen, then you can receive Swiss citizenship. Now, if we look at naturalization, that is a bit more tricky. And here we're going to look at ordinary naturalization. So here the duration of residency before application is really comparatively high to many other countries in the region, in the neighborhood. So you need to have lived in Switzerland for at least 10 years. However, years of residency count double if those years are between the ages of 8 and 18, although there's still a minimum of 6 years even for this age group. The type of residency document is irrelevant here in general, and there's a reduced time requirement for those married to Swiss citizens. So it's in most cases only 5 years. But in general, 2 to 3 years must be spent in the canton and municipality where the migrant will apply for naturalization, but here legislation can also differ per canton. So naturalization applications can only be submitted by those holding a permanent residence permit, and each canton has its own integration program and own integration requirements that applicants must follow. So there are some kind of general Swiss level kind of rules of thumb for successful integration and what that means for someone. And this is defined at the national level by the State Secretariat for Migration. And they must show respect for public security and order, for example, by paying taxes on time, not being the subject of debt collection proceedings, and not having any certified unpaid debts, and not having a criminal record. They have to show respect for the values enshrined in the federal constitution. They can communicate, they need to be able to communicate in a national language in everyday situations, both orally and in writing. So orally at a B1 level, in writing at a B2 level. They need to also participate in economic life or acquire an education. And this also means that they have to not have claimed social assistance benefits in the 3 years before applying for citizenship, or that they have repaid fully any social assistance benefits that they have claimed. And they need to have encouraged and support family members also in their effort to integrate. So quite a lot of requirements here, also quite subjective, or they can be looked at quite subjectively. And again, each canton then can have their own layer on top of that. So, you know, some municipalities might make the person have spent 5 years just in that municipality, for example. We can also then look at countries that are very strict and make it very difficult to naturalize. And here we can look at Qatar. So if we look just at citizenship by birth, as I mentioned before, there's only Ius Sanguinis, so citizenship based on the parental citizenship, and in this case also only based on the father. So citizenship is only passed down via the father for Qatari citizenship. There is some very limited use of Ius Soli, although basically those born in Qatar to unknown parents will also be naturalized as Qatari, and foundlings also are considered as born in Qatar unless proven otherwise. If we look at naturalization now, naturalization is very difficult. So you have to regularly reside in Qatar for 25 years, but can be absent for 2 months per year given their intention to return to Qatar. Need to also have a lawful income, no criminal record, and have a sufficient level of Arabic. So I just ran through several countries now, really going from countries that have the most easy acquisition of citizenship to countries that have more difficult acquisition to citizenship. Now, it's also possible to lose citizenship in countries, and this is also different depending on the country. So some reasons that people can lose citizenship in countries are either renouncing the citizenship, having a residency abroad, having given service in a foreign army or other service in a foreign country, having acquired foreign citizenship. So not all countries allow dual citizenship. So sometimes just by acquiring the citizenship of one country, you will automatically lose the citizenship of the other country. Another way that you can lose citizenship is by being proven disloyal or treason. Also having acquired citizenship fraudulently, or the loss of citizenship by a parent or spouse in some cases will also be passed down. Now, finally, we can also look at dual citizenship. So dual citizenship is really the legal status of citizenship held by a person simultaneously, really by 2 countries or more. You can have multiple citizenships. So only 47% of countries accept dual citizenship for both immigrants and emigrants, so people who have entered the country and people who have left the country. 18% of countries do not accept dual citizenship for either immigrants or emigrants. About 15% of countries only accept dual citizenship for immigrants. Now, almost 19% of countries accept dual citizenship only for immigrants, so people who have left the country. And here you can see in several different regions of the world, color-coded, which countries allow which things. So here you can see the blue is that dual citizenship is allowed for both immigrants and immigrants. The kind of reddish color here is that dual citizenship is not allowed for either group. We also have this kind of light blue turquoise color that shows dual citizenship for immigrants, whereas the yellow shows dual citizenship for immigrants, and in some of the other cases, citizenship is unknown. So I hope this video just gave you a quick look at citizenship in naturalization around the world, looking at the different ways that citizenship could be acquired at birth or through naturalization. We also looked at ways in which citizenship could be lost, and some issues around the ability to hold dual citizenship. So of course, as usual, again, all of the references for this video will be linked in the description below in case you're interested in looking more into any of these databases. I definitely urge you, if you're interested, to go look at the Global CIT database at the EUI, and of course the IOM GIMDAC database, also looking at citizenship and migration in the Migration Data Portal. If you're interested in other data on migration, you can definitely check out my whole range of videos looking at migration data, but here is a really good source for citizenship. Of course, if you felt like this video was helpful and useful to you, please do give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share it with anyone who you think it might be useful for. If you like this video, of course, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my videos that I upload every week on different migration issues. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.